Premier Sports TV here. Today we're going to be reacting to the weigh-in and also giving my full fight prediction for this fight. Starting off with the weigh-in, Joe Smith Jr. weighed in at 174.6. He's a WBO champion. Beterbiev weighed in at 175 flat. He's the IBF and WBC champion. Thoughts about the weigh-in. I actually like it when boxers, don't talk at the weigh-in, like don't talk crazy. I mean, of course, that's to, promote the fight for the casual fans. But like me, I like it when they get down to business. Like they just look into each other's eyes and get ready to fight. You know what I'm saying? Stare down. It was just, very smooth. Nobody trying to push each other. Nobody, acting out of character. They pretty much just looked at each other and told each other, like, look, we going up in here and we fighting, man. We got respect for each other, but it's going to be a fight. And that's what I respect. Now, going into this fight, right? Obviously, Beterbiev is the favorite, right? But here's where I'm conflicted, right? So I just watched Beterbiev versus Alexander Jovic, right? And Artur Beterbiev is there to be hit. He's there to be hit, man. He's there to be hit. Oftentimes he reaches. Now I don't know if it's because Alexander Jovic is he's a Will School boxer. Like he has an extensive amateur background, and he was using his spacing, and he may have a little bit more pop, but Beterbiev was there to be hit. Right, he was there to be hit. Beterbiev got dropped by Callum Johnson. He was in the pocket against Marcus Brown. Marcus Brown was hitting him. Wasn't hurting him, but he was hitting him. Right? Beterbiev does reach. He does reach sometimes and gets a little undisciplined with his attack. But he's in the pocket. He's in the pocket. He's trying to walk you down all fight, right? And just pretty much, destroy you and break you down. But Joe Smith Jr. has crack. Joe Smith Jr. he can crack. So, like, it's just like, it's very fascinating because Joe Smith Jr. This is what you call an unorthodox fighter. He doesn't have a typical stance. Like he kind of stands straight up, and his punches come from places that you don't necessarily look for, right? Because he's not a technician. Right, it's hard to defend. But then on top of that, he has crack. He got crack in both hands, especially in his right hand. And looking at the spread, right? So on DraftKings, the spread is, minus 750 Artur Beterbiev just to win the fight, period, right? And plus 500 Joe Smith. So meaning you got to bet 750 to make 100 for Artur Beterbiev to win. And if you bet 100 for Joe Smith Jr., you win 500. To be honest with you, like if you just want to bet, right, and just make some money, like if you have $200 to spare, and maybe make 1,000, you could potentially make 1,000. I would do it, but at the end of the day, let's be real. Artur Beterbiev is going to win this fight. Artur Beterbiev is going to win this fight. So only do it, if you really feel like Joe Smith has a puncher's chance and you know, you know what I'm saying? Like, and you have just $200 to spare, or even 100. But I wouldn't advise it, just to be honest with you, because I'm pretty sure that Artur Beterbiev is gonna. I think he's gonna stop. I think he's gonna stop Joe Smith. I think he's gonna stop him. Maybe within. I say eighth round, seventh or eighth round. I think is when Artur Beterbiev stops Joe Smith Jr. So let's go into the professional experience of both guys, right? So Joe Smith Jr. He actually has a really good resume. Professionally, he has a better resume than Beterbiev. Professionally, obviously Artur Beterbiev is a decorated amateur. He's had he's been around the world. He started once he went pro, he was fighting guys with well over 20 fights. He came in, I think he only had maybe 14 fights, 15 fights when he fought for his belt. So he's a decorated amateur. But Joe Smith Jr. has been in there with some guys, right? So he stopped Eleider Alvarez, right? He fought Jesse Hart, beat Jesse Hart. He beat Jesse Hart by split decision, of course. But he beat him. He actually hurt Bivol, right? Bivol pretty much pitched a shutout, but he definitely got to Bivol. He definitely hurt Bivol many times. Lost to Sullivan Barrera, but he dropped Sullivan Barrera, right? Stopped Bernard Hopkins and stopped Fonfara in the first round. So at the end of the day, he could punch. He's got a puncher's chance. He's been in there with some really good guys, and his resume is, he has a really good professional resume. Now with Artur Beterbiev, he's been in there, like I said, before his professional fight. I mean, his first professional fight was against a guy who had 27 fights. Christian Cruz, 12, 14, and 1. He had 27 fights. 27 fights. The next guy was Rayco Saunders, who had 45 fights, 23, 20, and 2. I mean, that's just insane. First of all, where do you get a record like that? Where do you get a fighter with a record like that? Like, like top rank. Like how? Next guy, I mean, it's just ridiculous. Then his let me see here. His sixth fight, he fought Tavoris Cloud, 24-2. Then fought Jeff Page, 15-0. I mean, his resume. I mean, he's fought guys who had experience, right? And because he's a decorated amateur. But here's where it gets a little tricky. He got dropped by Callum Johnson. Callum Johnson, he's pretty much a journeyman. I'll say that. I don't think I think Joe Smith Jr. has more crack than Callum Johnson. So then he stops. So Beterbiev stops Kalajic. He stops Alexander Jovic. And then, pretty much dismantles Marcus Brown, right? So that's where it gets a little tricky because, in terms of like professional experience, Joe Smith Jr. has been in there with, tougher competition, so to speak. Except for, Alexander Jovic, right? When he unified his titles. But either way, it's really the amateur experience for me. I think he's had over 400 amateur fights or something like that. And, I just think it's just going to come down to that experience. Joe Smith Jr. He's easy to root for. He's a great guy, humble. Um, he exemplifies everything right with the sport, right? A guy who didn't have, the great amateur experience, but he just kept trucking. He kept trucking and trucking and trucking and kept just grinding every single day, never cheating the fans. Always, come to fight, always prepared in shape, and always ready to, just go to work. Doesn't do too much, doesn't do too little, doesn't say too much, just gets in there and fights, right? And I'm happy that he's gotten this opportunity, right? So at the end of the day, and also he was in there with Joe Smith Jr. was in there with Maxim Vlasov. You know, just really experienced, retired, but just really an experienced fighter. But he had trouble. That's what I'm saying. Like, he had trouble with Maxim Vlasov. Like, he had trouble. And he's nowhere near the caliber of fighter as Artur Beterbiev. Same style, Russian style, but Artur Beterbiev is just head and shoulders better. So I just think that Artur Beterbiev it's going to be a good fight. I think it's going to be a very good fight. But at the end of the day, Artur Beterbiev is just going to be too much for Joe Smith Jr. So I think that Artur Beterbiev is just the overall better fighter, and I think that he's the best fighter in the light heavyweight division. And it's going to be like that for some while. And I expect for him to put on a great show towards the end of the fight and stop Joe Smith Jr. So that's my take on it. I'm going to be scoring the fight. I'm going to be doing a review after the fight. So, thank you for listening, and please subscribe.